Natasha Kaufman, and welcome to my podcast, Don't Just Talk, Say Something, Lessons on 20 Years of Business. Over the past 2 decades of running my public relations firm, NKPR, I'm so grateful to have met, worked with, and learned from so many talented industry leaders. And I'm so excited to be able to share their stories and life lessons with all of you on this podcast. There are not enough people in the world like this episode's guest, Carrie Kirkman. With over 25 years of experience in management for top women's apparel brands, Carrie has established herself as a leader in the women's wear industry. Carrie is also deeply passionate and committed to supporting and empowering women. Not only does she do this through her philanthropic efforts, but Carrie is a mentor to many and is deeply encouraging of helping women rise in the corporate world with the mantra of empowered women, empower women. Here's our conversation. Carrie, as you know, this show is very much based around 20 years of being in business and all the people that have really contributed to the growth of NKPR. And you're certainly one of those incredible people. So I'm very, very grateful for you. Maybe tell our listeners a little bit about your trajectory in business and in the fashion space, because I would say you're probably one of our biggest and greatest experts, certainly in Canada, but I would say in North America when it comes to fashion and retail.
That's very kind. So first of all, I just want to say congratulations on a remarkable accomplishment of 20 years. I mean, it's really something spectacular, and what you've built is something to behold. I know that I am in awe of you all the time, and certainly I'm grateful for all the years that you have been in my life, because you have had a huge impact on me as well. And I'm sure we'll chat more about that afterwards. But so my trajectory has been a little bit eclectic, I think, and non-typical. I have always been a person who loves this idea of following passion and not being scared to jump into things and explore. And I went sort of a lesser known fact from bodybuilding, where I was a competitive bodybuilder with a Mr. Universe as a training partner, to modeling. So basically did bodybuilding, competed in North America when I had reached the top that I was going to be able to achieve in that. I was like, time to move on. Naturally, because I was so fit, that segued immediately into modeling, which was something my mother had actually put herself through university modeling. So it was always sort of this weird sort of, as a young girl growing up, and you see these pictures of your glamorous mother in the 50s with her modeling. And it was sort of always something that I think anybody who's tall, it's sort of one of those things that sort of floats around the back of your head. Anyway, and I went and did that, and was fortunate enough to have worked in Europe, and really went headfirst into it again. So my attitude was try it, give it 100%, see how far you can go, and then be okay about moving on once you've reached that point. And from there was the natural segue to the fashion industry, because there were many clients, regular clients that I had, who were very supportive of me joining their companies when I was finished with modeling. So once I had got that out of my system, I remember calling somebody who had been very supportive of me, and I had worked with quite a lot, and she had the brand Alfred Sung for Eastern Canada. And she had always said, when you're finished with this, let me know and you'll always have a job. And I reached out, and basically, I think I spoke to her on a Friday and started on a Monday. And
this was Montreal, Carrie?
It was in Montreal. And that was, I think, 7 or 8 years, the start of my career. And I mean, she took somebody where I didn't know one fabric from another. I didn't know any terminology, but I loved people, and I was voracious about learning about the industry, about retail, about wholesale, about design. And I would say by 3 years in, I was running her business for her. And I was already merchandising lines with our licensed partners for Alfred Sung. So I had already sort of stepped into the industry in a much deeper way. And then I was fortunate enough to be recruited from Montreal right after the referendum to Toronto. And that was professionally the best thing I ever could have done, because obviously, in terms of Canadian fashion industry, Toronto was sort of the center of the universe. And that provided a ton of amazing opportunities for me. And really, I went from sort of one large company to the next from there. Liz Claiborne and their whole portfolio of brands. I was there for 5 years, and I think there were 18 brands at that time, DKNY and Kenneth Cole, as well as the Liz brands, which were the dominant department store businesses in the country at that time. And that was an amazing education, because that was a wholesale business that was run by retailers. So it was very business focused. And I went from there and was recruited to Hudson's Bay, which was an interesting leap. And that was my jump from wholesale to retail, which is not very typical in our industry. Typically, you choose a lane, and you're either a wholesaler, a brand person, or you're a retailer. But they provided me with an amazing opportunity to sort of round out that whole experience. And I had, I think, 7 years at Hudson's Bay running different businesses for them, and had huge success. And that was really the big sort of pivot for me at that point, because I had multiple businesses that had been declining for many, many years handed to me, that had huge amount of turnover and leadership for those business units. And I was able to get traction and actually turn those businesses around successfully. And I did it once, and then I did it in another business environment. And that sort of solidified my ability to fix broken businesses and to figure out how to unlock value. And then I was recruited to Jones, New York as president. So that was my first real president position. Was there for 5 years. Same thing. The brand was in a big decline when I first went. They were thinking about rolling it into the US and shutting down Canada altogether. And then I was super fortunate that they gave me the runway to re-engineer the Canadian operation. And as you know, that's where we met, and had an opportunity. And you were a huge part of, I think, our success in the country, really rebranding and creating a very different voice for the brand in the country. And it really sort of became synonymous with working women and being supportive, women supporting women, women's empowerment. I stepped into that in a big way, and really it spoke to me, was super inspiring. And then through partnerships like yours, it was just a remarkable window in my life. So always be grateful for that.
I love that. Well, for a number of reasons. I remember with Jones, New York, Canada became very much a best practice for them in the US as well. I remember so much of what we did here, they took on in the US as well. And I love that. I love that Canada was able to to lead. That is how we met. And this podcast is very much around women supporting women. And so maybe let's talk a little bit about our first meeting, which you and I, giggle over quite a bit. But let's talk about that. Why don't you tell everybody about that first time that we met?
So I was asked very kind of last minute to participate in I think it was like a CBC radio, I think. There had been an article or a book published that was about sort of feminine, I'm going to just paraphrase it, but essentially it was really about a perspective on women using their feminine whatever in order to get ahead in business, etc. And Carolyn Lawrence, who was the CEO at the time of Women of Influence, it was Natasha and it was I. And I knew Carolyn through a partnership that our businesses had together. And then I had never met Natasha. We walked into, it was a museum, wasn't it?
Yes, it was the AGO.
AGO.
Yeah.
We walked in and I see this woman sort of walking in around the same time as me, all dressed in black, of course, looking like like a boss babe. No, it's like unbelievable. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, I bet she is such a bitch. Because I'm looking and I'm thinking she was just super pretty, super fashion, just super like, would have been so easy to fall into a cliche of a certain kind of woman. And anyway, we ended up walking in together. I find out that this is Natasha. We get introduced to each other. She is literally the sweetest person I've ever spoken to. She was gentle, and she was kind, and she was without any kind of arrogance or any edge, any bad way edge. And I was like just completely blown away. So I was in love with her from the minute, because of the juxtaposition, I think, right, between what I'm thinking that you must be like versus how you showed up, which was so completely the opposite. And then that was really the start. I think I walked out, and I remember going back to the office afterwards saying I just met like the coolest woman. And then I think we ended up having dinner together shortly afterwards. And then that was the start of a lot of years.
Yeah, it's so true. I remember leaving that day thinking that's going to be my new best friend, and you are, and you were, and it is interesting, how that happens. You and I both know our friend Craig Lawrence from New York. He was on the podcast as well, and we talked a bit about the people that you surround yourself with. It's not an accident, but it is a choice. And so the people that enter your life, you have this choice to, is this going to be, you're only successful as the people that you surround yourself with. And so you have to choose your people, that really sort of are the heart of you. And, I feel like we chose wisely, because we have had the privilege to work on a lot of, amazing things together. And obviously personally I've been, super close friends. You talked a lot about the successes that you had in churning around those businesses. What do you think that was? Like, what do you think those sort of learnings and lessons were that you were able to turn those businesses around?
I think in most cases, it came from a couple of things. I think the fact that I have not had a very linear career has provided me with sort of insights that are broader. So I'm less locked into paradigms, or like, it must be this or it can't be that. And I'm more curious. And so I think if I see a problem, I'm also, it's almost as if it's very easy to put myself as the consumer in many of these cases. And it becomes, it starts to become quite clear to me. And I think many people in business, it sounds a bit trite, but can overcomplicate things. I think very often solutions are quite simple. It's tricky to execute. That's where the leadership, that's where being able to get people engaged and marching to the same, beat is really makes things happen or not. But identifying the opportunity, being able to see through the noise, I think that can be a lot more simple than people realize. And I didn't feel the need to overcomplicate things. I found in many cases it was really distilling the business back down to its roots, its simplest foundation. And often businesses have been evolving. You have multiple leaders, each leader's trying to put their spin. It's almost like you have this mushroom where the stem is so skinny, and that's the thing supporting the whole business concept. Whereas I sort of reverse it, build the foundation properly, get the core correct, and then the rest happens. It's a lot less sexy to operate that way, because you're not coming in and trying to be super sophisticated with all of your, like, justifying yourself through complicated solutions. Sometimes it's literally A plus B equals C. And if you can execute that really well, you can turn around large, complicated businesses. So I would have to say, I think my ability to just simplify stuff has been a big part of it.
Yeah, I do think we overcomplicate things. It both, I think, professionally and personally. Sometimes it's just look at what's right in front of you and keep it simple.
Exactly.
For
Exactly.
sure. You're all, you are someone that is all about empowering women. I often think that women are harder on women than men could ever be. And you've worked with men, you've worked with, with women. What is some advice that you can give uh, women as they're trying to progress in their career,
Sure.
which can be challenging, these days?
So I have been really fortunate that my greatest successes have been under female leaders,
Mm,
and not easy women, by the way, very demanding women that maybe other people have struggled a lot with. I've been fortunate that those type of women have allowed me the rope to do what I needed to do. I was always very conscious of the fact that if I made a mistake, I would be out on my butt, but they gave me the room to do things a little bit differently. I would say for all women, there are way too few female role models still. I mean, at the end of the day, you take a look at the leadership of really the top leadership of companies, it's still obviously predominantly men.
yeah.
And let's face it, business was designed by men for men because there were no women engaged in it. Like they weren't purposely trying to keep women out. Women weren't in business. But the reality is it's not set up to be easy for women. We can't go to a clubhouse and take a steam together. We can't, there's a whole bunch of networking that happens that women are excluded just by gender. Um, so I would say for the women who have reached some level of success, and by the way, when we'll talk a bit about this after, not just the women who have those positions of power in a company, but if you, let's start with the ones that do, you have a particular responsibility to have that empathy and awareness of the fact that women require championing. I love this line, like name and echo. It's not me that made it up, but they've proven that women have to repeat their point more than twice in a boardroom for it to get the same recognition as a single drive-by comment that a male makes. And I think a lot of women who have been in predominantly male environments would be nodding listening to this because they would have had this experience where they've said something, had very little reaction around a boardroom table or an executive table. 10 minutes later, a man repeats almost verbatim what you've just said. And all the guys are like, yes, yes, exactly. That's great, Bob. It's like, it's almost cliched. So if you're a woman and you're in a meeting with another woman, if she makes a point, you say her name and you repeat her point. That's how you can reinforce and empower. So there are things we have to be aware of that rebalance the power in some of these dynamics. And also be that woman who is supporting other women when they're not in the room together. That to me, to know that you've got another woman's back or you are an active supporter of other women, not just all in a room together, but literally when you're in a room alone in a moment that you could have a positive influence. I think that it empowers you. It's not just about what you're doing for other women. And I think for people who are not yet where they may be aspiring to be in their careers and may not feel like they have a lot of power or influence, I would say the ability to impact culture happens the second you enter a company at any level. You choose how you're going to show up. Do you want to be a positive influence? Do you want to be somebody who's recognizing and looking for opportunities and ways to celebrate? Or are you going to join pity parties and get discouraged and get into the whole negative spin? Literally, you start to establish yourself as a leader the first day you enter a workplace. How do you want to show up? So I think if people thought more about that, and the fact that you never know who you're interacting with that may have a life-changing impact on the course of your career. I don't think I had a resume until probably a couple of years ago. Every single role I had was a referral from somebody who had an interaction with me. It wasn't necessarily somebody I worked with every day. It could have been somebody I may have had 3 interactions in a year. So you have no idea who is going to have that kind of impact. So think about that every single day. When you show up at work, when you're at a meeting, it's that level of engagement and sort of intentionality that can be life-changing. And that has nothing to do with a title.
Yeah, it's so true. That, that saying, empowered women empower women.
I love that.
That's the epitome of you. I actually could listen to you talk all day, every day, because you speak with so much kindness and empathy, but also so much power in the words that you're speaking. So thank you for that. I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about our favorite fashion moments. Because you talked about, guys have their steams and their saunas, and that's how they bond. Well, we bond through fashion, through fashion trips. And so what's your favorite? I mean, we have many, your favorite sort of fashion memories.
Oh my God. Well, okay. I'd have to say, I mean, it is really hard because you literally are my guru for this. I mean, my husband cringes every time we're together traveling somewhere because he knows there's going to be some serious damage done. But certainly you have been the person who has you're my fashion Sherpa, I'm going to say. So I love everything about, your style and your aesthetic, and it's just, it's very aspirational for me. So, and I'm like Carrie copycat when there's so many things that we have that, Natasha will have, and I'll be like, would you mind? Do you mind if I go get it? But I would say that one of the big ones was wandering through Rome and coming across my first Birkin, which was a pretty big deal. That was like a holy grail moment for me. So that was a pretty special one. And then I think even we were in Paris together and I got my first Chanel necklace and my first Chanel handbag with you.
Yeah.
That was a pretty big deal. That was like a rite of passage for me. So I loved that.
That's funny. No wonder your husband cringes. It's like, oh no, not her again. That's true. The Birkin was really, it was super special because that little shop, you could blink and you'd miss it. It's like half a store. It's like being John Malkovich has like half a floor. This was like, I don't know, 1/10 of a store. Like you couldn't even really walk in without feeling claustrophobic. But this woman has the best selection of like vintage Hermes. And she's been there for like 30 years and we found her. and so I love that. It's true. We got your first Birkin and your first Chanel together on those trips. Even when we don't shop together, we end up with the same things, because I think the Balenciaga jacket you bought on your own and I bought on my own, and then we realized we have the exact same jacket. And I would say one of my favorite I actually, all my fashion moments with you are so wonderful, because I sometimes will call you to be my voice of reason. And I think I did that during COVID because I was looking at a bag and I said, do I need this? And you're like, well, where are you going with it? I was just like, okay, that's true. That's fair. And so you're sort of my voice of reason when I'm wanting to buy something. And sometimes you're like, go for it, you should do that. And then sometimes you're like, but don't you have something kind of similar? And I'm usually, yeah, I do. And then we don't. But I love our New York trips and our Rome trips and our Paris trips, and all of them, quite frankly. And soon we're going for your birthday trip to New York. So that will be really, really nice. tell me, what do you think, I mean, we're now worked together 8 years, 9 years, maybe 10. It might be 10 actually. What do you think some of the biggest learnings are from working together?
I mean, I feel like it's interwoven into so many parts of, first of all, who I am and how I think about work. I love the fact that if you have a really honest relationship, how strong collaborations can be. I think that idea of a partnership that's anchored in there's a trust and an understanding. It's if it's a bit it's the cliche, like what you get out is what you put in. So if you're invested and if you are transparent and you try to look for solutions together, etc., I think the sky's the limit. I think that says a lot for different partnerships that people have out there, is that if you're struggling with the partnership, you also need to look at what your investment is in it. So seeing how successful that could be. And I also believe there's a uniqueness. Not everybody is going to click the way that we clicked. And, I think for me, there was an easiness. Like, it was so surprising to me. It was like I found this long lost sister almost that was also super smart and, was really somebody to admire in terms of just savvy and just like all around rock star, so it was, I think a lot of those things, but most importantly is just how great it is to have a trusted partner is a big deal for me.
One of my biggest learnings through you is being a better leader. You are somebody that you lead with a lot of empathy. And how you talked about, you had leaders that gave you a lot of rope, and you lead like that. And through you, I've become better at that. And I think that's necessary, because that's how your team builds confidence. If you give them that opportunity. And I feel like I am a better leader because of you. So thank you.
It's very kind.
No, it happens to be true. It's one of the reasons I'm so happy that I'm doing this podcast, because I think there's so many rich and deep learnings from the past 20 years and all the incredible people I've had the privilege to know and to meet. And I love the fact that we're able to share a little bit of that with others. So thank you. I always end the podcast with this question. And I've had some very funny and bizarre answers. So we know each other very well, and we've known each other for a long time. But if you have the opportunity right now to ask me a question, something that you don't know about me and something that you've always wanted to ask, and it could be anything, because trust me, I've answered a lot of bizarre questions.
Okay, that's a good one.
So anything, you can ask me anything. What would it be? Something that you don't know about me.
I guess I would ask, like, what was your dream for yourself when you were a little girl?
Well, it probably wasn't to get married at 17 and have a baby at 18 and kind of be like, oh, what do I do now? But actually, it was the best thing that could have happened to me. But what was my dream? I mean, my dream as a little girl, I was a little immigrant girl that couldn't speak the language. I think it wasn't a dream, but it's interesting. I just wanted to fit in when I was little. And I would say then when I grew up, I realized that it's my differences that actually make me unique. So celebrate what makes you unique, as opposed to when you're little, you kind of just want to fit in, because I felt so different. I often have said that I grew up in Edmonton, where everybody was named Stacy and had blonde hair. And, I was this Jewish girl with black, dark hair, and my name was Natasha. No one could pronounce it. And I just always felt different. And now I realize that it's the things that make you different are the things that you need to actually hone in on and celebrate. So it wasn't a dream for me. It was just, when you're young, you just try so hard to fit in. But I learned, and you remember when I did my TED Talk, what I did learn as a young child was there were so many incredible people that showed up for me. And then what I realized as I got older is that is the key to actually being a successful adult. And, I define success by being just genuinely happy. Like, that's success to me. And so I think that what I learned was it's important to show up for others, but you can only do that if you show up for yourself. And, that's sort of a long way to answer your question. But I guess my dream for myself, I just want to be happy. And it took me a lot of years, whether it's personally, in relationships or professionally, to just figure out. It was easier to figure out professionally, believe it or not, than personally. That sometimes the most important thing is just be happy and surround yourself with like nice, good humans. So like yourself. So Carrie, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being on the podcast. I love you, and I'm excited to be able to share you with so many other people. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me participate in this as well. And again, congratulations, and I love you right back.
I feel so fortunate to have Carrie in my life for so many reasons, and I love what she said about if you have a really honest relationship, it can lead to strong collaborations. That is so true. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I always love hearing from you. Feel free to DM me at NatashaNKPR, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review and rating. Until next time.